Welcome to the Pick Up Korea podcast. It's been a while, so I figured that I would make an episode answering some of the listeners' questions here. And I've been busy recently. We've had a few boot camps over the past month or two. And it's been going really well. Students seeing massive progress. And as usual, if you're interested in a custom training program, we can do a 1 day program of day game, street game, dating modules, night game, covering texts, pretty much anything for custom coaching, as well as the 3 day bootcamp program and the long-term immersion program. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and drop a line either here in YouTube or to the email address, ketherk@yahoo.com. So anyways, to crack right into this, I got the first question here, which asks, is there such a thing as leagues with girls? So I think that what he means is basically, are certain girls out of your league and are certain girls in your league, right? And so first of all, it's very important to understand that the way of mentally seeing that way, where a girl's above you or below you, ultimately is not good, right? So you should be seeing her just as another person, another soul on the path of life, right, so to speak, as cheesy as that sounds. But you don't want to be putting girls on a pedestal, right? So if you see her, if you see a girl, on the street, in a coffee shop, in a bar, and you're thinking or feeling that she's out of your league, then of course, when you communicate with her, when you think about her, when you talk to her, when you look at her with your body language, you're going to naturally come off as sort of either fighting for rapport, trying to win her attention, or just kind of lame and needy because you think she's above you, right? And so ultimately, the mental shift of seeing her basically just as another girl with her own, pros and cons, her own life, is very, very important, right? So first of all, there's that mental inner game aspect of it. However, of course, there are hotter girls in any given country. In Korea, of course, there are a lot of really hot girls, and a lot of, decent ones, pretty girls, cute, average, and below average, right? And so, of course, by the mere fact that the really hot ones by local standards are going to be more sought after, they're going to be hit on more, they're going to be DM'd more, messaged more, in general on high demand, that means that it can be harder to get them out on dates, right? They have busy schedules, they have their life, their friends, their social circle, work obligations, and then of course on top of that, so many guys hitting her up, so many guys messaging her, right? And so of course it'll be naturally harder in many respects to get a girl out on a date who's like 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 by local standards versus, a typical foreign hunter type chick, plain Jane Korean girl, or even less than average, who's like a 4 or 5 by local standards out of 10, right? And who speaks English and is into meeting foreigners, right? So this is just common sense, right? But don't let that hold you back, though, from actually approaching girls that are extremely attractive to you, and don't make it a mental barrier, right? And so, in terms of leagues with girls, it's more about their availability, how often they're getting hit on, and so therefore, one would have to be comfortable talking with them, which takes experience, right? And also be able to relate with them on their level, which is something I talk a lot on the ebook. Showing that you can be part of their world, part of their reality. They see you as a real person, right? That they can actually meet up with, rather than some weirdo or some nervous guy or some needy guy or just some sort of transient, alien foreigner, right? Which on the other hand, though, that can also work out sometimes too. If she's attracted and she knows you're, here for a short time, yeah, sometimes that'll work out as well, right? So anyways, when it comes to leagues with girls, that's really the crux of it, right? Another question we have here is breakups. Okay, interesting. How to do them or how to get over them. So let me explain how it really works in a lot of Korean relationships, which is that it's a culture where people often just slowly stop contacting each other. For example, say you have a girl you're dating regularly, or a girlfriend, or like a short term, some, as they call it in Korean, right? Which is sort of like beginning stages of dating, right? So what will happen is that you will be messaging each other, meeting each other on some kind of regular basis, right? Could be a handful of messages a day, could be, messages every hour, whatever it is. And then maybe you're meeting her once a week, twice a week, right? What will often happen is the girl or the guy will slowly start messaging less, offering his time up less or her time up less, right? So it goes from, handful of messages a day to one a day, one or two meets a week to one every 2 weeks, and then it just slowly starts kind of phasing out, right? And of course, you have a lot of girls who just end up ghosting, right? So ultimately, a lot of ways, or really the main way that you'll see Korean people do this, is sort of phase out, the kind of gradual phase out of contact and meeting, right? However, of course, there will be times where the person will keep pushing, and maybe you need to make it clear, and it is good to set your boundaries. So there are other ways to do it by being kind of direct, meeting her in person, especially with ones that you've been dating a longer time, right? So you might want to meet her in person, kind of explain the situation, and that's really in her best interest. It's in both people's best interest to sort of cut this relationship off, right? It's no longer a win-win. Maybe feelings have moved on, maybe you have things going on in your life, and so on and so forth, right? However, with the sort of emphasis in Korean culture on saving face, really you do see this first one that I mentioned, the kind of gradual phase out. You really see that a lot more often in relationships that aren't over, several months or a year. When they're sort of, 1, 2, 3, 4 months, you often see that. And even honestly, even after a year, sometimes you see it like that as well, right? So those are a couple tips for kind of breaking up, cutting things off, and really how the locals handle these types of situations, right? Okay, another third question we have here is, does learning game ever reach a point of diminishing returns? Okay, so yes and no, right? So there are always ways that you can improve. There's always things you can optimize. There are always, for example, different things you can experiment with, getting better at body language, getting better at your verbal skills, communication skills, getting better at Korean per se, getting better at leading, getting better at being more understanding or empathetic, more able to read the girl's emotions, getting better at, as I think I mentioned, expressing yourself, getting better at being more sexual, or your sexual expertise, so to speak, right? Being more of a well-rounded person, getting better at fashion, getting better at day approaches, getting better at night, socializing at night with groups, getting better at texting. There are all these little micro skills, right? So it's always possible to get slightly better, slightly better, slightly better. However, the question is, does it reach diminishing returns? Well, yeah, of course, right? So if you're really good at all these things and you're spending time trying to get, you're like 99% better than most guys, you're in the top 1%, so to speak, and that's all you're doing is gaming all day, probably, it is diminishing returns, because probably you should be focused more on your health, on, maybe joining a sport or a gym, getting into shape. Maybe you should spend more time on business, cash flow, other sorts of hobbies to have a more fun and interesting life that doesn't only revolve around meeting women, right? So hobbies, learning new languages, sports, instruments, reading books, starting a business, providing value to other people, right? Like doing, traveling the world, maybe going on a meditation retreat. There's all kinds of things that you can do with your time. And so, I think it's as with anything, every area of your life can have diminishing returns, right? So like if you're going to the gym 10 hours a day, I mean, you're probably already in really good shape. It's sort of like, maybe you should cut out, 8 hours or 5 hours of it and spend some time with your family, your friends, or get another hobby or something, right? So I think this really applies to really anything in life, right? There's that. All right, another question we have here is, do Korean girls hold off from getting emotionally invested into foreigners? since most of them are going to leave anyways. Okay, so this is a pretty good question here. Kind of like this question. So, yes, to a degree, yes. So oftentimes on the initial open, on the initial approach, okay, the girl might be screening you out, right? So a lot of guys who come here for like a month on like either like a long vacation, or they're kind of wanting to check out Korea, see if they might want to live here, they'll say things like, "Oh, I'm leaving soon," and you can kind of see in the interaction when they say these things, kind of the girl looks disappointed, or like, yeah, no real reason to meet him up. That's too bad. I was interested, but you can see kind of the attention, or the interest, sorry, drop, right? And so it is good to position yourself as somebody who is staying longer term, right? And really, if you like Korea, of course, you're probably planning on coming back or spending part of the year here. And if you do live here, obviously, then, really making that clear that you live here, you work here, your life is here, your friends are here. And, and basically that you are a real person, not this transient, here today, gone tomorrow kind of guy. Because a lot of girls will ultimately worry about that. They'll worry about meeting you because you might be leaving tomorrow or next week or next month, right? And if you're somebody on vacation, it really is better to sort of position it that you're thinking about staying here long term, because that leaves the option open of her, if she's coming out to a date with you, the option that you guys might have something that it might be worth meeting you because you're going to be around, right? Or you possibly could be around Korea long term, right? So yeah, other girls, they might be, some really conservative girls might be wary of dating foreigners because they think you can leave at any time. So you can kind of go back to the tips I mentioned earlier, kind of like your life's here, you're planning on doing business here, all of your friends are here, you have no plans to leave, you have other ambitions in Korea, right? So that can really help, right? However, for people who, if you're going out to night game per se, and you're really trying to get a YOLO in the moment SNL at like a bar or a club, then, it might not hurt to mention that you're leaving very soon anyways, right? However, from really split testing this though, I find that it is better to sort of state that you're really thinking about staying long term. I've really seen this with, clients and other people who come in and out of Korea, right? And so, yeah, ultimately, if you are staying here long term, if you're staying here, working here, living here, studying here, then most girls will, they'll be up for, if they're interested in it, they'll be up for a date, up for a relationship. However, like I said, the more conservative types might be a little wary. So there will be sort of, objections, concerns that you would have to address, and to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel assured that you're not just leaving tomorrow, right? All right, so I think I really did answer most of these questions here. However, I think that I will mention that if somebody's interested in taking any training programs, you can email the email in the link. And for the next 3 weeks, I think I'll offer a 25% discount on all programs. So if you are interested, go ahead, send an email, and we can also correspond via Skype. We can also meet up for a coffee, discuss if it's a good match for you, and go from there. And probably in the next podcast, I'll have either one of the recent guys who took a boot camp on, so you can kind of hear what the experience is like, right? Or even somebody who's taken one single day session to kind of break down the value of it, because really every time I coach some of these programs, they always mention the massive value they get out of it, how, they spent years doing this and they got further insights, further knowledge, further skills in a day than, a year or two doing it on their own. And just to hear how worth it is for your own time. You can waste a lot of years, a lot of days trying to figure it out on your own, or really just speed up progress massively in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, or even a long-term program. So with that, I think we really wrapped up all the questions here today. So until next time.